We will check back in with you soon. Meanwhile, the State Department is issuing a worldwide travel alert, saying that growing anti-Israel and anti-U.S. demonstrations could result in violence against Americans. Alex Hogan is live in London, where thousands have taken to the streets there in recent days in support of Palestinians. Alex, where are these protests happening today?
Hi, Sandra. So we've seen a lot of protests here in London outside of Downing Street, but really these have stretched all across the world. It's taking place today in countries like France and Pakistan, in Egypt, even India. Major protests spilling out into the streets. And what we have seen in a lot of countries is that they often congregate outside U.S. and Israeli diplomatic buildings. Take a look at this video. This was earlier today in Turkey. Massive groups of people gathered there. Once again, protesters even lit Israeli, U.S. and British flags on fire. And it was a similar sight earlier this week in places like Tehran.
Look at this crowd.
Protesters also set fire to American flags. And in Jordan today, once again, thousands of anti-Israel and anti-U.S. protesters gathered outside Israel's embassy. Earlier in the week, as protests there turned violent, police actually had to use tear gas on these crowds. Today in Indonesia and Malaysia, massive groups of people gathered outside the U.S. embassy, stepping on photos of U.S. President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as burning more flags there as well. Now today back at home in Washington, D.C., another day of demonstrations and protest. Crowds are continuing to grow on the National Mall. More than 1,000 people there calling for a ceasefire. But again, overseas, the State Department is urging any American abroad really to take a lot of caution that these demonstrations could create more dangers for Americans abroad, potential attacks or even terrorism. Now, what we're seeing in some of these embassies, again, yesterday, Lebanon, the U.S. embassy there in Beirut urged any Americans still there to leave as soon as possible while commercial operations and options are still available to them. Sandra.
Alex Hogan live for us there. Alex, thank you. John.
Sandra, American Ari Spielman arrived in